Welcome back, parents. Today's episode is an all-time fan favorite. It's our number one most popular episode that actually aired for the first time way back in 2022. And it continues to be downloaded as recently as just last week. So what I wanted to do is bring it up to the top of our list to prevent new listeners from having to go digging way back in the archives in the first few episodes of our show, because this is gold. Now, why is this our number one most downloaded episode of all times? Well, because it is packed with all the best research about what truly matters when it comes to raising kids. Dr. Leonard Sax, our guest, is a world-renowned speaker, physician, and PhD psychologist. He's also one of the top parenting experts in the country. Dr. Sax has written 4 books that have topped the charts on the New York Times list. They are Why Gender Matters, Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, and my personal favorite, The Collapse of Parenting. Today's episode focuses on Dr. Sax's research about what's wrong with today's parenting, the effects of video games on kids, the American culture of disrespect, rules at home for managing screens. Yes, he gives guidance for how to manage screen time with your kids. He talks about whether school matters and the importance of developing character at home versus expecting it to come from schools. So enjoy the episode, and please be sure to share it with those people in your circles. Dr. Sax, let's jump right in, because today you're talking to a community of like-minded parents who want to raise the bar in parenting and family life, not just settle for the status quo and what our culture tells us is good and right, but parents who are willing to be intentional about developing moral character in kids. But with that, we need some education and research to help us understand why we need to implement some new rules and practices in our families. So I think a good place to start would be for you to tell us what's behind your New York Times bestseller, The Collapse of Parenting book. Help us understand how we got where we are today in parenting and family life. And then, of course, please share with us the secret. What is the primary factor that predicts future health and happiness in kids and teens, and why?
All right, so thank you for that introduction. So what does that title of my book refer to, The Collapse of Parenting? Let me illustrate with a story from my own practice as a family doctor. So this boy, he was in 9th grade at the time of this story, and his performance in school had really taken a nosedive, not doing well. The teachers had pulled out these Connors rating scales. He's not paying attention in any of his classes. So they went to a child and adolescent psychiatrist who said, well, he's off the chart on the Connors scale. Certainly looks like he's got ADHD. Let's go ahead and start some Vyvanse and see if it helps. And the Vyvanse was tremendously helpful. The first day, the teacher called mom and said, oh my gosh, I had no idea your son was so bright, so clever. Tremendous improvement on Vyvanse across the board. But he started having insomnia, loss of appetite, jittery, palpitations, and the parents found an article I'd written for the New York Times about where I was critical of the overuse of these medications and expressed concern about those side effects. So they brought him to me for a second opinion. And I asked the parents, I said, does your son get, good night's sleep? How much sleep does he get? And mom said, well, we're always absolutely sure to make sure he's in his bedroom 9 o'clock at night every night. And we wake him up at 6 a.m. the next morning. So 9 to 6, that's 9 hours. That's plenty. So then I turn to the boy and I say, do you have a video game console in your bedroom? He said, yeah, of course. So were you playing last night? Yeah. Okay. So what were you playing? Oh, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty. So when did you go to bed? They figured 1:30, 1:45. Okay, he's going to bed after 1 a.m. in the morning. He's trying to wake up at 6 a.m. He's getting less than 5 hours of sleep a night. He needs 8 or 9. He's sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation perfectly mimics ADHD of the inattentive variety. There is no Connor scale or Vanderbilt interview that can distinguish between whether this kid's not paying attention because they truly have ADHD or whether they are sleep deprived. Vyvanse was incredibly helpful. Why? What's Vyvanse? It's amphetamines. It's speed. It's compensating for the sleep deprivation. But the appropriate remedy for sleep deprivation is sleep, not Schedule II amphetamines. And that's a good illustration of what I mean by the collapse of parenting. One of the parents' most fundamental jobs is to ensure their kid gets a good night's sleep every night. No video game consoles in the bedroom. No cell phones in the bedroom. That's not just my opinion. That's the official guideline of the American Academy of Pediatrics. But when I tell parents, hey, your daughter can't be going to bed with her phone, some parents will say, oh, I couldn't take her phone away. She'd totally freak out. That's the collapse of parenting. Parents who are uncomfortable exercising authority or unwilling to exercise authority or incapable of exercising authority. And so one of the objectives of the book is to empower parents to do what they know they should do. Because other parents will say, yeah, I know she shouldn't have her phone in her bedroom, and I tried to take it away, but she said all the other girls have their phones in the bedroom, which may well be true. But you still have to do your job as a parent. You have to say, at 9 o'clock at night, the very latest, you take the phone from your kid and you switch it off and you put the phone in the charger, which from now on is going to be in the parent's bedroom. Kid can have it back tomorrow morning. And when you announce this to your son or daughter, they will not be happy, very likely, if this has not been the policy, if they've been going to bed with their phone. And your daughter may protest. She may say, but I use it as my alarm clock. Remind her that they make actual alarm clocks. They still do. You can go to the store and buy one. They're not expensive. And now she may get really upset. She may say, but what if there's an emergency? Remind her that you still have a landline, a house phone in the parent's bedroom. And if there's a true emergency, her friend is welcome to call the home phone. And you, the parent, will pick up. And you, the parent, will decide whether this emergency warrants waking her up at 2 a.m. or not. It is not fair. Some parents read the New York Times or listen to NPR, which says that good parenting means letting kids decide. Well, that's not accurate in all domains. It's certainly not accurate in this domain, the question of whether or not to let a teenager have a phone in their bedroom. It is not reasonable or age appropriate to put that question in the lap of your 14-year-old daughter. What's she supposed to say tomorrow in school when her friend says, hey, I texted you last night at midnight. How come you didn't answer? Is your 14-year-old daughter supposed to say, well, researchers have found that sleep deprivation in adolescence is a major risk factor in the etiology of both anxiety and depression? That's ridiculous. You can't expect a girl to talk that way. You have to allow her to say, hey, my evil parents take my phone every night at 9. Won't let it have it back the next morning. It is your job to ensure no screens in the bedroom, no phones in the bedroom, no video game consoles in the bedroom. And this is in some ways a uniquely American challenge. As you mentioned, I've spoken on this topic in England and Scotland, German-speaking Switzerland, Germany, Australia, New Zealand. And I can tell you that in each of those countries, it would be very unusual for parents to allow a child to go to bed with their phone. But in this country, it's very common. The original title of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, the title of the book I sent to the publisher was The Collapse of American Parenting. And the subtitle was Why Most Kids Would Now Be Better Off Raised Outside North America. But non-celebrity authors don't get to choose their title. So the title is The Collapse of Parenting. One of the points I'm making there is you have to find the courage to do things differently from your neighbor. When your daughter says all the other girls have their phones in the bedroom, she may very well be telling the truth. And unless you're going to move to the South Island of New Zealand, come on, you're staying here in the United States, where indeed most of the kids have their phones in their bedrooms. So you have to have the courage to say to your daughter, other parents may be doing things differently, but in this home, we're going to follow the guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics. There will be no phones in the bedroom, no video game consoles in the bedroom, no screens of any kind. in the bedroom. Your daughter's going to be upset. If she's had her phone in the bedroom and now you're telling her no more phone in the bedroom, she's going to be angry. And the first week will be difficult. And she may be angry and she may give you the silent treatment. But if both parents stand their ground, and that's a big if, especially when you're talking about divorced parents, if both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, you will have a child who's sleeping better, usually a happier child, usually a healthier child. Stand your ground, do the right thing, and your child will benefit. Letting kids do whatever they want is not in the kid's best interest. What is childhood for? A 4-year-old horse is a mature adult. The Kentucky Derby is raced with 3-year-olds. A 4-year-old human has barely begun. Humans are children or adolescents for more years than most animals live. And a horse is a bigger animal than a human and is fully mature at 4 years of age. So it can't just be about physical maturation. Why? Why is human childhood and adolescence so long? Well, we don't have to guess. We have scholars like Dr. Melvin Konner at Emory, who's devoted his professional life to studying and answering this question. He wrote a big book called The Evolution of Childhood, comparing development in our species with development in other species, especially other primates like chimpanzees, gorillas, and monkeys. And he concludes, and others have concluded, that human childhood and adolescence takes as long as it does because it takes many years for parents to teach the kids what the kids need to know. Letting kids decide is not only a dereliction of duty on the part of a parent, it's profoundly unhuman. It's not what's in our DNA. We are programmed, genetically programmed, to take many years to teach our children what the kids need to know. It's your role, it's your responsibility as a parent to set down the rules, to set appropriate guidelines, to explain the guidelines. You want to be the just right parent, not the too hard parent, not the too strict parent. And I talk in the book about just right versus too hard versus too soft. You want to be just right, but what does that mean? It means no screens in the bedroom. You explain why there are no screens in the bedroom, but you don't negotiate. That point, no screens in the bedroom, is non-negotiable. And for many American parents now, they let kids decide whether to have phones in the bedroom, whether to have video game console in the bedroom. And that's part of what I mean when I talk about the collapse of parenting. I'm not really blaming parents. If I'm blaming anything, I'm blaming the culture. American culture now systematically undermines the authority of the parent. And so it's hard. It's harder to be a parent, to be a good parent today than it was 20 or 30 years ago, because your authority as a parent has been undermined. And that's why I think there's a need for books like mine to empower parents to do the right thing.
Absolutely, Dr. Sax. And one thing that stuck out to me that you said, just the very idea that we would leave the choice in the lap of our 14-year-old daughter or son. That is tempting our children really towards what is bad for their health and for their mental health as well. But we do that so often. You're so right that we give that authority to our kids to make those decisions.
Well, speaking of temptation, that reminds me of another parent. So I was doing this presentation at this school about evidence-based parenting, so going over these guidelines, including no screens in the bedroom. And during question and answer, a father raised his hand and he said, Dr. Sax, I heard everything you said about the importance of good night's sleep. I totally agree with that. And kids shouldn't be distracted by their phones during the night. I totally agree with that. He said, but, my daughter, she uses her phone as her alarm clock. So when she goes to bed, she puts her phone in airplane mode. So she won't be distracted by it. And then, the next morning, the phone wakes her up and then she switches the phone out of airplane mode back into regular mode. I think that's okay, don't you? Taking the phone away, that seems a little harsh. And I said to Dad, how do you know your daughter keeps her phone in airplane mode? How do you know she doesn't switch it out of airplane mode? Excuse me, Dad was clearly very offended by my question. He said, Dr. Sax, you are suggesting that my daughter would lie to me. My daughter would never lie to me. And I said, sir, I don't know you and I don't know your daughter. But I can tell you, based on the research, your daughter's more likely to lie to you than to anybody else because she cares what you think, because she doesn't want to disappoint you. She doesn't want to let you down. I said, there's great wisdom in the Lord's Prayer. Jesus said, lead us not into temptation. He did not say, make us strong to resist temptation. He didn't say that because Jesus knew the human heart. And he knew that if you lead us into temptation, we will fall. Don't put that stumbling block in your daughter's path. No phones in the bedroom.
I think this also reminds me of just a visit we had recently with my nephew who came to town, and he's used to having his phone with him. And we let him know that one of the rules in our house is that there are no phones or no screens upstairs, that at nighttime we dock all electronic devices in our kitchen on the main floor. And he forgot the first night. So he woke up the next morning and he's sleeping right beside his phone. And so we just gently reminded him again, hey man, this is a rule in our house. We've never allowed phones upstairs, and we don't want you to do that here. And so I think beyond just setting that for our own children, even taking it a step further and having that courage to just tell visitors that come over that, hey, this is just one of our ground rules here. And so having a place to charge the phone and have it out in the open for them to access if there was an emergency, it's great. But don't even let your guests be tempted into that in your own home, right?
Well, I do have to say I don't recommend the phones in the kitchen, because I can tell you as a family doctor about many families where the boy sneaks down at midnight, gets the phone, uses the phone, and then puts it back in the kitchen, and the parents don't realize what's going on. So I do advise that the devices go in the parents' bedroom, because otherwise, again, you're creating a temptation for that kid to sneak down and break the rules. And again, parents will say, oh, my son would never do that. You don't, maybe your son wouldn't want to, but you got to realize he's an American kid living in the United States with kids who are listening to Drake and Lil Nas X and Cardi B and watching American television and American TikTok and American YouTube, all of which is disrespecting the authority of parents, is encouraging kids, is telling kids that doing what your parents tell you to do means that you are hopelessly lame and a loser, that cool kids disrespect their parents. It is not fair to your kid to expect them to stand up to the entire weight of American culture and say, I am going to do as my parents have asked me to do. Because making such a statement labels you as incredibly lame and pathetic. You have to allow your kid to say, my evil parents take my device and put it in the parents' bedroom next to their bed. I cannot retrieve it.
Great recommendation. I'm going to take that advice for sure. And in terms of the music, say a little bit more about the messages through music and social media that our kids are getting in regards to respect for authority and what is good and right. I mean, what are they being infiltrated with?
So last month, the number one hit song in the United States was from Drake. And that number one hit song called Jimmy Cooks is full of the F word, the N word, the A word. It is relentlessly obscene and profane. The New York Times praised this latest release from Drake for his lyrical vividness. And Drake, incidentally, is the most popular artist, not only at this moment, but in American history. He's had more number one hit songs than the Beatles, more number one hit songs than Madonna or any artist. In July 1964, the Beatles took all five of the top five spots on the Billboard Top 100, and experts in the music field said, oh, that'll never happen again. No one will ever dominate American music the way the Beatles did because the market is too segmented, too fractured. Well, Drake did it. Last September, Drake captured not only all 5 of the top 5, but 9 of the top 10, which the Beatles never did. Drake is the most popular artist in the United States right now. And most parents have no clue who he even is. When I speak to parents over 35 years of age, they don't even know who Drake is. Their kids are listening with their headsets or earbuds. Parents have no idea that their kids are even listening to this stuff. Little Nas X got 2 Grammys for his song where he says, "Can't nobody tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing." And that's kind of the motto, that line from his Grammy Award winning song. Lil Nas X kind of summarizes American popular culture right now. You can't tell me nothing. Can't nobody tell me nothing. And I contrast this with American popular culture a generation ago. So a generation ago, Sam Cooke had a #1 hit song in this country where he sang, "Don't know much about history." He's saying, now I don't claim to be an A student, but I'm trying to be. Because maybe by being an A student, baby, I could win your love for me. He goes on to mention French, geometry, and trigonometry as subjects in which he's going to try harder to earn an A rather than a B, because he believes that by earning an A, he will raise his status in the eyes of the pretty girl. That was characteristic of American culture a generation ago. That was a #1 hit song in this country a generation ago. Not anymore. It is impossible to imagine Drake, Little Nas X, Cardi B, or Megan Thee Stallion writing a song about, and all of whom have had #1 hit songs in this country recently, writing a song about wanting to get an A instead of a B in trigonometry. That would be a joke. The culture has changed. American popular culture is now a culture of disrespect. The opening chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Culture of Disrespect, where I provide evidence to support that claim, that American popular culture is now a culture that teaches kids that being disrespectful to your parents, being disrespectful to teachers, and being disrespectful to other kids your own age is cute, it's funny, it's hip, it's what cool kids do. And this is true whether you're talking about the Disney Channel or whether you're talking about YouTube, the most popular YouTube videos, the most popular TikTok videos. American popular culture is now a culture of disrespect. It is a toxic culture. And that was not true of American popular culture 50 years ago, which was a culture of, Sam Cooke and the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel. And 50 years ago, Loggins and Messina had a huge hit with their song Danny's Song. Even though we ain't got money, I'm so in love with you, honey. Every day will bring a chain of joy. And in the morning when I rise, bring a tear of joy to my eyes and tell me everything is going to be all right. That was a huge hit in this country 50 years ago. And again, this is not nostalgia. This is not a rant. This is not a guess. We have lots of research on this topic, which I cite. Scholars have looked at the most popular hit songs. 50 years ago, the most popular hit songs in this country were about love. Today, the most popular hit songs are about sex, often about sex that is transactional, meaning sex for money. So 2 years ago, Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion had a huge #1 hit song with their song WAP. And I don't know what the rules on your podcast are, but we really can't say what those 3 letters stand for because it's obscene. It's, again, the A word, the F word, the N word. But they're talking about sex for money. And they advise women to get your man to pay your tuition and to give you jewelry in return for giving him sex. And this is not a unique song. This is characteristic. Again, scholars spend their time looking at what the most popular songs are about. And now there's no mention of love or relationship in Cardi B's song that was a #1 hit song, and Bruno Mars' song, That's What I Like, the #1 hit song, which won 6 Grammys, meaning that in the Recording Academy, this is the best America has to offer. It won the Grammy for Best Song. So Bruno Mars in his song, That's What I Like, is offering a woman money for sex. offering to just give her his credit card if she will just, quote, turn around and drop it for a player because that's what I like. And this is the best the country has to offer, in the opinion of the Recording Academy. The video has had over 2 billion views. That's billion with a B. This is American popular culture, and it is toxic. It is harmful. So another very practical rule that I recommend in my book, The Collapse of Parenting: no earbuds, no headsets in the car. When you're in the car with your kid, you should be listening to them and they should be listening to you, not to Cardi B or Bruno Mars or Drake. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have music in the car. My daughter and I, when we're in the car, we're listening to Simon and Garfunkel or Peter, Paul, and Mary, and she knows all the lyrics to Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. There's a lot of great American music, most of it written before 2000, and you can sing along. And there are some good artists and some good music still coming down the pike, but it's rarely a number one hit song in this country. You have to know what you're looking for, and you have to listen with your kid. You should be listening to music with your kid. Your kid should not be in the bedroom with the door closed listening to music that you don't know about, because if they're just going through YouTube and looking at the most popular videos, a lot of that is really toxic, profane, and obscene.
And really, what it's doing is it's desensitizing our kids to their bodies, to relationships, right? So nothing has value in the sense that kids would want to get married or share their life exclusively with one person anymore. It's if they're getting this same message over and over from the videos they're watching on YouTube, from the video games you mentioned like Grand Theft Auto and these types of things, and then they're hearing this same message through the top 40 hits, it's really impacting their thoughts and their beliefs about themselves, regardless of what a parent might think or believe differently. Is that right?
You're absolutely right that what kids listen to influence their behavior. And again, I just wrote a article for the Institute for Family Studies. If you just Google my name, Leonard Sax, and why culture matters, you'll see an article they just published 2 days ago, where I cite some of this research showing that kids who listen to degrading lyrics about degrading sex, which is characteristic of Drake and Cardi B and Bruno Mars, that influences their beliefs, it influences their behavior in harmful ways. They're more likely to engage in risky sexual activities, for example, as teenagers, compared to kids from the same demographic who don't listen to that music. So, yeah, it really does matter. What your kid, the culture matters. And if you're stepping back and you're following the advice of the New York Times and NPR that says, hey, let kids decide, you're putting your kid at risk, because this is not a healthy culture. This is American popular culture is now a toxic culture. And if you let your kid engage in that and get immersed in that, you're increasing the risk of bad outcomes, anxiety, depression, disengagement.
And I imagine some of our listeners are thinking, oh my gosh, I can't imagine just cutting all these things off and making these new rules, and my kids are going to be so upset with me. You know what? We talk about this all the time in our community. Better for them to be a little upset right now than for you to deal with the magnitude of consequences when they're 15, 20, 30 years old and they're having problems in relationships and in life and jobs, and this culture of disrespect has just infiltrated them. And then you're looking at your kid going, who is this? How did they get that way? So better to be disappointed today than long term, right? I think there's a saying, you're only as happy as your most unhappy child. So we have to say no when other parents are saying yes. I've even told my kids, myself, and my husband have said, listen, if everyone else is doing it, we're probably not going to do it, because the pendulum has swung that far to the side where it's just overboard and so much coming at you that you're going to hear us say no when some of your friends' parents are saying yes. And that's okay. We're okay with that. And like you said, you can put that back on us.
Yeah. So I have another story from my practice as a family doctor that illustrates that. So for 18 years, I was an attending physician at Shady Grove Hospital in Rockville, Maryland. And one night I got a call in the middle of the night from the ER regarding a patient of mine, not to admit the patient or even to consult. This was a 15-year-old girl who'd been a victim of sexual assault. The girl, they were completing the forensic exam, but mom was in the ER and had asked that I come in because mom was very upset. And, I'd known this girl since she was a toddler. I'd known the family for many years. So they asked me to come in just to talk to mom. And I agreed to do that. And I came in to the ER, actually met mom in the consultation room adjacent to the ER. And when I came into that consultation room, it was just mom and me. And when I walked in the room, the first thing mom said, she said, I knew I shouldn't have let her go. It was a frat party at the college. She's 15 years old. I knew I shouldn't have let her go. And of course, you want to shake mom and say, well, then why'd you let her go? But I didn't do that because I knew the answer. She wants to be her child's best friend. And so many American parents will say, I want to be my kid's best friend. And those parents are mistaken because a friend is a peer. A friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, you are not going to that party. A friend cannot say, I am taking your phone and you're not going to bed with your phone. There's any number of kids out there who can be your kid's best friend, but none of them can do the job of the parent. None of them can do the job of the parent. So a better example of good parenting, I was speaking to parents in Tampa, Florida, and I shared that story about that daughter who was a victim of sexual assault because her parent would not say, no, you're not going. And a mother shared with me her story of her 14-year-old who came to her and said, hey, guess what? In 2 weeks, we're all going to Cancun. And mom looked at her phone. She said, why, I can't get away. I'm busy. And her daughter said, I didn't say you're going to Cancun. We're going to Cancun, me and all the girls. And mom said, okay, you're 14 years old and you're going to Cancun with a bunch of 14-year-olds over spring break. Uh, I don't think that's safe. That's where college men go for spring break. And you're 14, but you could easily pass for 18. And I don't think some college guy is going to ask for ID. I don't think it's safe. And the daughter said, oh, it's totally safe. We'll stay together. We'll have our phones. It's totally fine. And mom said, no, you're not going. And she told me her daughter totally exploded, started screaming at her, I hate you. I hate you. You're going to totally ruin my whole life. And mom said, well, to be honest, sometimes I'm not so fond of you either. She said, but I'm your mom. And that's a job. Like any job, it has a job description. And item 1 in my job description is I have to keep you safe. And I know more than you do about the behavior of drunk young men, and you are not going. If you're doing the right thing for your kid, there will be times that your kid gets angry with you, may say some very hurtful things. Unfortunately, that's part of the job. And being a parent in the United States in 2022, it's not easy because the whole culture has undermined the authority of the parent and taught kids that it's cute and funny and hip to disrespect your parents, to lie to your parents, to keep your parents out of the loop. So it's tough. And again, I wrote my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to empower parents, to encourage parents to do the right thing and to give them the evidence. So it's not just a rant or a sermon, but to give them evidence-based guidelines for what is best practice for parents.
And I certainly got that message from your book. I've read it twice. It's underlined and highlighted. And I bought the book from my friends and shared it with them. And I would encourage any parent listening to this to buy the book, get together with a group of other parents and talk about the book. Go chapter by chapter. I love chapter 6, especially, that talks about what matters in parenting, right? And that's how we got to this topic today is what is it that truly matters when it comes to our parenting? What should we be training up in our young kids in order for them to be truly happy and successful and healthy as kids and young teens? So Dr. Sax, speak to that a little bit about what that one factor truly is that leads to health and happiness and success for kids.
So what should our top priority be as parents? So we don't have to guess. We have researchers who've done longitudinal cohort studies where they follow kids from childhood through adolescence, through adulthood, right through into the 32, 35, 38 years of age. So in one of these studies, they interviewed all these kids, did a comprehensive assessment at 12 years of age to determine for each one of these kids their emotional stability, their grades at school, popularity, friendliness, agreeableness. And then you follow the kids for another 20 years. 20 years later, these kids aren't kids anymore. They're 32-year-old adults. And you track them down and you determine for each one of them their health, their wealth, and their happiness, their life satisfaction. What characteristic in a child measured at 12 years of age powerfully and accurately predicts health and wealth and happiness 20 years later? It's not how well they're doing at school. It's not how popular they are. It's not how friendly they are. It's not their emotional stability. It's self-control and other measures of conscientiousness like honesty. So it follows from that evidence, and I devote 2 chapters of the book to reviewing every relevant longitudinal cohort study. We've got quite a few, and they all come to the same conclusion, that conscientiousness, meaning self-control and honesty, powerfully and accurately predict health and wealth and happiness 20 years later. But no other parameter predicts health and wealth and happiness. And again, American parents, middle income and affluent parents, act as if getting into Princeton or Stanford is the most important thing. That's what they really care about. But we have good research showing that that is simply not true. Got one very important study where they looked at kids who were accepted to Princeton and Stanford, and some of those kids attended Princeton and Stanford, and others did not. And they control for race, ethnicity, household income. So it's very important in this kind of research to control for household income, because the children of affluent parents do better than the children of low-income parents. That's a very robust finding in American sociology. So, but you look at these 2 kids who are basically identical. They come from homes with the same income. Kids have the same high school grades, same high school test scores, and they both got accepted to Princeton and to Stanford. One of the kids chose to go to one of those elite schools, and the other kid did not, went to community college. And now you follow those kids 20 years down the road. They're in their late 30s. There's no difference. Going to Princeton or Stanford does not boost long-term income compared to that kid with the same background, same high school grades, same demographics. Where you go to college, if you come from a middle income or affluent household, has 0 to very little impact on your long-term earnings 20 years down the road. And American parents don't believe it, don't get it, don't buy it. They think that where you go to school, where you go to college matters immensely. It doesn't. And we also have other research that if your kid is concerned about being amazing and getting into a top school, you greatly increase the risk of anxiety and depression without any corresponding boost in achievement. And that's the work of Sunia Luthar, who I've cited on many cases, and she's published many studies on this topic over the last 20 years. And the bottom line of all this research is that teaching virtue, teaching your child to be conscientious, to be honest and self-controlled, is the most important thing you do as a parent. It's way more important than helping your kid getting into Stanford or, getting that internship at, the investment bank. That's not what is important. And again, this is not a sermon. This is a robust empirical finding that teaching honesty is more important than boosting your kids' academic achievement.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. We talked about that in our first episode with our CEO, who was sharing his own story about how his personal coach met with him when he was super frustrated with his teen kids that were just kind of lazy and entitled and weren't kind of measuring up in his standards. And his personal coach said, you develop their intellect. You have really bright kids. They get great grades and they're smart. And a matter of fact, they know their faith better than you do. But in terms of their moral character, you didn't develop that. And that's what you got to go back and do, is work on developing their moral character. really building up the character strengths, or like you called it, virtue within your kids. And so that's what we do here at Families of Character, is we give parents practical tools to implement on a daily basis to really practice and implement honesty and respect. And one of our kits in our subscription kit is all about self-control, that one factor that predicts future health, happiness, success, and wealth. And so I think it's just, our message aligns so well, because you're saying the culture is crazy. The music, the videos, the television programs are giving us such wild messages about what it means to interact with authority, whether it be your parents or teachers. And it's time for us to truly take hold and be the primary educators of our kids when it comes to these moral character traits, right? Like you said. And so I again want to just emphasize what Dr. Sax is saying here, is that, parents, we have what it takes. We have what it takes within our own relationship with our spouse, within our own household, within our communities, to stand up and do something different for the culture. And so I want to encourage you to do that. Start again with something simple. After listening to this episode with Dr. Sachs and all the research and the longitudinal studies and just his personal experience in visiting different schools and communities throughout the world, start by just picking up a copy of this book. Just start right there. The Collapse of Parenting. You can buy it anywhere you get books.
And it's available as an audiobook. I auditioned to read the book, and they turned me down. They didn't like my voice. Yeah, and in their defense, the voice actor they got is really good. So his voice is nicer to listen to than mine is.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, you recommend we don't allow our kids to use earbuds when they're listening to things. Now, with this audiobook, do you think that's something to listen to with children present or not?
With older kids, for sure. Not with young kids, 5, 6, 7, because to explain to parents the toxicity of American culture, you have to talk about the toxicity of American culture. And I don't think 6-year-olds need to hear that. Unfortunately, most 12-year-olds already know about it. Most 12-year-olds know more about Drake than their parents do. Uh, yeah, 12 and up, I would say, can certainly listen along with you. And and many parents have told me it's a fun conversation starter. And some kids will agree and some kids will disagree and push back. And that's fine. Again, one of the points I make in the book is that it's great to have a discussion, and you want your kid to feel comfortable saying, Dad, I don't agree with you. I think you're mistaken, and here's why I think you're mistaken. That's fine. We encourage that. But it is never acceptable for a kid to say, you don't know what you're talking about. That's crosses a line. That's out of bounds. And again, one of the objectives of the book is to remind parents to set the parameters for what is healthy discussion and disagreement and what is out of bounds disrespectful. And again, a lot of American parents don't get that. They'll say, well, my child's disrespectful. That's part of being creative. That's a very common notion in this country, that disrespect and creativity go together. And that is simply false. And again, in the book, I present the evidence. We have good evidence showing that as disrespect has risen, American creativity has plummeted. So it is not the case that you need to be disrespectful in order to be creative. That is false.
I love how you said, make sure you're setting the parameters and making sure that your kids know what is out of bounds, because it brought to mind for me something that I noticed in my own practice. For 18 years as a counselor, I'd have couples come to me, and one parent would inevitably, just be firm about the boundaries and what they thought was good and right for the kid. And their spouse would undermine that right in front of the child. Oh, I think it's fine. You're being over dramatic about that song, that Drake song. Everybody's listening to it. He knows that message isn't good, right? And so then the parent who's trying to hold the boundary, depending on the closeness of the relationship or what's going on there, may just cave.
Well, and I do talk about that. And I advise parents never disagree in front of your kids. Say to your spouse, hey, Katie, can we step aside and discuss this somewhere else? And never disagree. You got to present a united front. Again, this is a much. And there's also a gender aspect here. So, a generation ago, 50 years ago, the father was typically the stricter parent. And mom would say, just wait till your father comes home. So, a generation ago, the father was the strict parent and the mom was the less strict parent. We now have good evidence showing that is completely reversed. In the United States today, it is typically the mother who's trying to get the kids to eat the vegetables and to do their homework, and dad is the goof off parent who's saying, oh, come on, we don't need to eat our broccoli, we can just pig out on ice cream, and who cares about the homework, let's play video games together. So the gender dimensions have really flipped, and it's disorienting for many of us, because the mom expects dad to be laying down the law and he's not. And why are so many men dropping the ball? It's actually the main focus of another book I wrote called Boys Adrift. And the subtitle is The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men. What's going on? Why are so many men now incompetent fathers? That's a separate question. I don't address that in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, but I do address it at some length in my book, Boys Adrift.
Wow, I think that's a resource we need to grab onto as well then, because we're either, most of us have a boy or a man in our family or in our lives. So that would be very helpful advice, I can tell, just from reading this one book of yours. So thank you for that. Well, in terms of practical ways, since we all want healthy, happy, successful kids, practical ways to build up those self-control muscles in our kids. Can you throw a couple out there?
Some of the guidelines I recommend in the book is very intuitive. No dessert until you eat your broccoli. No games until the chores are done and the homework is done. And if that has not been the rule in your house, I advise you to make it the rule in the house. And if that has not been the rule in your house, don't do it gradually. Sit down with your kid and say, hey, we've been doing some things wrong here. We're going to put in place some new rules starting now. No devices at the dinner table. No dessert until you eat your vegetables. No games until all the chores are done and until all the homework is done. And as I mentioned before, if that's not been the rule and you make that announcement, there will be an explosion. And the older the kid, the louder and longer the explosion. But if both parents stand their ground after 6 weeks, as I said earlier, after 6 weeks, not after 1 week, after 6 weeks, you will have a child who is better self-control, who is healthier, and usually who is happier as well.
Thank you. Those specific practical ways to really implement self-control in our kids are helpful. And I love the just, very pointed advice. It's like no bones about it, no screens in the bedrooms, right? Do what you need to do before you do what you want to do is what you're saying when you say do chores before video games. It's helping our kids to order their right priorities. And I think that's what helps our culture get back to this, what is good and right. What is good and right is to do what you need to do and to be responsible before you start engaging in these passions and desires that you have. So thank you so much for your practical tips as well. This is something that our parents can implement tonight, maybe 24 hours later after they've had some time to marinate on it and talk about it as a couple, or set up that family meeting to just really, like you said, be humble and come before their kids and say, listen, we've been doing some things wrong and we've just learned, we've just gotten new information, research-based evidence that's going to help us to help you. And then have those conversations and set those new rules in place. So Dr. Sax, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your expertise and insights, and really for your passion for parenting and family life in this crazy culture. I'm very, very grateful to share your message with our parent community. And parents, be sure to check out the show notes for links to buy his books and his audiobook, The Collapse of Parenting, Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, and Why Gender Matters. And parents, please be generous and forward this episode to your family and friends, because this truly is a message of both truth and hope. Thank you, Dr. Sax, so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
And also, I want to just plug real quick, your website is leonardsax.com. Is that the best way for parents to find you? And tell us real quick, are you still out in the community giving talks at schools and churches and other places?
Absolutely. Next week I'll be in California, and then in Western Idaho, and then in New Buffalo, Michigan, over the next couple weeks. I hope people will go to my website, leonardsax.com, leonardsax.com, where you can also find brief descriptions of the various workshops I lead for schools and for parents. And you can also see my upcoming schedule. If you would like to attend any of those workshops, you'll find it on the website. And that's also where you'll find my information about how to get in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Sax. And parents, don't delay. Implement this stuff today. And we'll see you next time on the Families of Character Show.